Mike, go right ahead. Valerie, have you been able to capture everyone so far? You'll capture it later.
Oh, I've got everybody's, except I don't know what SMC is.
Okay. Whoever has the designation of SMC, could you identify yourself for the record, please?
My name is Susan Corvo, 34 Amadon Drive, Ashford.
Thank you. Okay, we will call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, a special meeting for Monday, April 17th at 7:02. First order of business will be to call to order and seating of alternates. I don't think anyone has joined. I think the only regular member we're missing is Nord. And so we will seat Doug Jenny for Nord.
Jeff, you're also missing John Calabrese.
Yes, John called in to say he wasn't going to be able to make it. Thank you. And Luther, for that matter, Luther and John. Okay, so we are looking for the approval of the minutes from our earlier in the month, April meeting of April 10th. I will start before we go into doing motions and such like this. I did see a change or a addition that needs to be made where John Calabrese, though he wasn't mentioned, he was on the meeting. He was in attendance for the hearings in the meeting last time we met. So we can accept the minutes with that change, having mentioned them here and capturing it. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes with the
Motion to approve.
knowledge. Jerry,
Motion.
motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second, Alex.
Alex seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? I think everyone is here. So moved. Thank you very much. Moving on to public comments. And again, these are public comments for items not listed on the agenda. I will remind all the members of the committee, as well as any public in attendance, that being a special meeting, no other items may be added to this special agenda meeting. We simply are, being a special meeting, we are only able to go through the posted and warned agenda as provided. So any public comments, please either electronically raise your hand, wave at me, one or the other. If you have anything you wish to share for anything that is not currently on the agenda that we have for tonight. It looks good. Okay, I don't see anything else. All right. So much for public comment at this portion. Bills, both Alex and Michael. I see just one from the Chronicle. That's all we received for $230.56.
Yes.
Okay. Any correspondence received that we need to mention or share?
No, not for this.
Mike, do you have anything?
Nothing additional at this point. Nope.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the multiple public hearings we have for this evening. And again, I appreciate the patience of all the applicants because we were dealing with a large and well-attended issue. And again, thank you for your patience in allowing us to follow through on that and then eventually get to your applications. So in opening the first public hearing, we will open the hearing known as PZ-23-3, which is a special permit application per section 300-10 for reduction of a non-conforming use at 54 Seacar Road. Owner applicant is Ruby Realty LLC, and they are represented by Kahan, Karinsky, and Copacella with Dory Famigoletti as their attorney. And if the applicant would like to start, again, our procedure will simply be hearing from the applicant, Then there'll be questions and comments from the commission members, then public comment, and a final statement from the applicant. So I open it up to the applicant and their representation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dory Famigletti from Kahan, Kerensky, and Capicella, representing the applicant, Ruby Realty. I have my client here with me in case any questions are required of him. We are,
Excuse me, Dorian, his name?
yes, his name is Russell Cable.
Thank you.
He is the owner of Ruby Realty.
Very good. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
No problem. Thank you. As you know, this property at 54 Sekar Road is the subject of the application tonight, and I want to give you a little bit of history about it. It's in an RA zone, and it's about 24 acres. Ruby Realty came to own the property around 2016 when the property was going through a foreclosure. Prior to the time that Ruby Realty owned the property was owned by Our Lady of Mount is it Caritas? I hope I'm not saying it wrong, but Our Lady of Mount Caritas Monastery. And they've owned the property previous to them and since about 1974. And I want to be clear on what the property is. Originally, the property was 3 separate parcels. They were shown as lots 4, 5, and 6. And I believe submitted with the application, you have a lot reconfiguration plan that shows the delineation of those 3 lots. So they were originally 3 lots. The sisters acquired them between 1979 and 1992. They acquired lot 4 first in 1979. When they acquired lot 4, there was 1 house on that property. That first house was built according to the assessor's records in 1977. Thank you, Mike. So lot 4, you can see there is on the left side of the page. The first house, there's 3, it's kind of hard to see. Thank you for zooming in, Mike, but there are 3 houses there. The one closest to the road is shown as I believe that's hold on, that's what's deemed to be St. Mary's. And that's the one closest to the road. And then back from there is St. Joseph's. That sleeps 4 and housed the old bakery. And then on the right-hand side is a proposed chapel and 2-bedroom guest house. We'll talk about those in a moment. But the first house was built in 1977. And then in 1992, a second house, I believe it was the St. Joseph's, was built, and that was in 1992. That was also built on lot 4. Now, interestingly, in the early version of your regulations dating back to 1972, more than 1 house was allowed on a lot. In fact, the definition of a lot was a parcel of land occupied or to be occupied by a building or group of buildings. So when that second house was built in 1992, there was no problem having the 2 houses on the 1 lot. In the year 2000, your regulations changed, and your zoning regulations thereafter said that you can only have 1 principal building on a residential lot. You could have accessory structures, but 1 principal building. So in the year 2000, those 2 houses on this property became legally non-conforming. Fast forward then about 8 or 9 years later, in 2011, the lots 4, 5, and a portion of lot 6 were all combined into 1. So now we have 1 lot. But again, keep in mind, the nonconformity is pre-existing, and the multiple houses that predated the change in the regulation about having to do with how many houses per lot, it was grandfathered in at that time. So that was in 2011. Those lots are combined, and then things get a little more complicated thereafter. In March of 2011, Zoning and building permits were then issued to the sisters for the construction of a third building on lot 4. Again, I say lot 4, it's all one lot now, but it's the area shown as lot 4 on that reconfiguration plan. That third building was to be a chapel with a 2-bedroom guest house. We pointed that out when Mike had the reconfiguration plan up. Now, that third building was built with zoning permits and with building permits, all approved through the town. And it was built even though prior to that, there was expressed some concern by the Planning and Zoning Commission that there were already 2 houses on the parcel and that issues could arise in the future if the monastery were to close. Regardless, though, zoning permits were signed off, building permits were issued, a foundation was built, a septic system was designed and approved by the health department and installed, and the house was built. It's hard for me to tell you what the ZEO or the zoning official at that time was thinking. It's possible that they interpreted the regulations to say that as long as the property is being used for a religious purpose rather than single family purposes, that limit on number of dwellings, number of primary principal buildings on a property did not apply. But it's also possible that the zoning agent could have thought that because the property originally was 3 houses or 3 properties, maybe he thought 3 houses could be built on it. I don't know, and that zoning officer is no longer with the town, so I can't really shed any light on that. But be that as it may, the sisters did work with the local officials, the appropriate local officials, and did get zoning approvals and building permits to build that structure. And as I mentioned, the foundation went in, the septic was designed and installed, signed off by the health department, and the exterior framing was completed, inspected, signed off. All of the building files reference that. Construction did stop in 2012 when the sisters ran out of funds. So although the exterior and the frame of the third building is there, it hasn't been completely finished on the interior. Then fast forward, those financial problems persisted. The property went into foreclosure, and ultimately my client ended up buying that property in 2016 after consulting with the town to make sure that he would be able to use it if the monastery went defunct and wasn't continuing operations as a single family property.
Gloria,
Yes.
you've rattled through a lot of history.
Mhm.
One of the items that was not clear to me, how many septic systems were installed or permitted on the properties? And was there a separate septic for each building, or were some of the buildings sharing septic?
I
Richard?
believe,
Richard, excuse me, Dory. Richard, we'll have time for comments and questions. I'd like to let the applicant go through
Okay.
their material first. Thank you. Go ahead, Dory.
okay, I will be happy to address that. Just so I don't forget, there are 3 septic systems, and the most recent one was approved in connection with the 2011 permits for the chapel with the 2-bedroom guest house in it. So there are 3 separate septic systems, one for each of the dwelling units. So my client did lease the property back to the church, the sisters' order for a period of years, but financial constraints still continue. And at this point, it's time to do something different with this property. And we're strapped with a somewhat unusual circumstance because we've got a non-conforming property now. We've got a non-conforming property that's got 3 buildings, 3 principal buildings on one lot. And it's protected as a nonconformity, but it's protected to be used in for a religious purpose. The permits were issued for it to be used for religious purposes, but the monastery is no longer a viable user. So,
Religious and living quarters.
right,
Which brings
right,
it
the-
back to the residential.
thank you. So my client mentions religious purpose, and the chapel was to have living quarters as well. So we've got this nonconformity, and we've got a limited use that we can make of it with regard to the religious purpose. Even though a religious use is not the permitted as of right and I guess principal use in the RA zone, which you know is your primary residential zone in town. So because of this quandary, it led me to talk to your town staff and your town attorney to try and come up with a solution. And we think that solution lies in section 300-10 of your regulations. And that section of the regulations allows this commission with a special permit to change one non-conforming use to another non-conforming use, as long as it's a less offensive or a more conforming use. So here we've got the non-conforming use, and that's going to persist. That's the multiple buildings on one lot. But we can change that to a more conforming use by abandoning the religious use, which is only a use allowed by special permit in your zone, and convert that to a permitted as of right use, which is a typical residential single family purpose. So although the nonconformity continues, the use itself becomes less nonconforming. It's as a permitted as of right use, a single family residence in your single family zone, it's presumptively deemed consistent and compatible with the neighborhood. Whereas, as you know, a special permit use really requires special consideration on a case-by-case basis to determine whether it's appropriate on any given site. So by moving from a special permit use to a permitted as of right use being residential, and foregoing that special permit use, we believe we're making the non-conforming use more conforming with the overall zone and the purpose of the zone, which is to be your residential zone in town. And we're offering, as part of that, in order to ensure that the residential use is compatible and conforming with the neighbors and the neighborhood, we're offering a number of conditions or restrictions, if you will, on the permit. We are proposing and agreeing that we will abandon the specially permitted religious use upon the filing of the special permit if you deem it appropriate to grant. We are agreeing that we will not further expand the footprint of those 3 existing buildings. So there will be no expansion of those, and there won't be any other additional primary buildings built on the property. We agree that we will not sell or convey any of the buildings separately. So really what that does is it protects you against my client or a future property owner condoing the property and selling the houses as separate condo units. So it will all be under one ownership as opposed to a different owner for each structure that's there. And we're also proposing that if there's any future lot reconfiguration, which would perhaps maybe come by way of a future owner wanted to re-subdivide the property, that the portion of the property dedicated to housing these 3 structures would never be less than 270,000 square feet. And I just came up with that because 90,000 square feet is the minimum lot area. And I timesed it by 3 because there's 3 houses there. So that was kind of an arbitrary number, but that was the rationale for that. And the reason we were proposing that condition is because there's case law that says you can't condition a zoning approval on prohibiting any future re-subdivision. So I wanted to protect the integrity of that property to make sure that if there ever was a future division of that land, that there would be sufficient land to satisfy the requirements or the intent of your reg that each house has the minimum lot area associated with it. So we do believe that although it's an unusual circumstance, having this monastery and religious use and church, if you will, in a residential zone. We do believe that we're making it more conforming by abandoning that religious use and using it for a permitted purpose. If the property were, even if the sisters can't maintain the property and it's no longer used for that specific religious order, if it's still allowed to be used for a religious use, it could be open to a different religious order and religious purpose. They could be holding services in the chapel. There could be people coming and going. There could be congregants. There could be retreatants. There could be visiting clergy coming and going and staying on the property. Whereas here we'll be eliminating that potentially more I mean, it's not the right word, but dense use, the higher turnover of people coming and going from the property. Will be eliminating that and just dedicating it really just to residential purposes and all under common ownership. So it'll be much more compatible with the residential uses we've got surrounding the property. We think it's a good way out of an unusual circumstance. Again, the property was all and the multiple dwellings were all specifically approved and permitted by the town. Even though it appears that it's created a bit of a zoning quandary because we now have this nonconformity. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I know I've given you a lot of information, and my client's here, and he can also address some of the background if you have specific questions for him and the investigations he did when he purchased this property.
Okay, thank you very much for that trip down memory lane, the historic and the current status. I appreciate that greatly, as do I'm sure the other members of the commission. I do have a couple, but I'm holding mine in check, a couple of questions. So I open it up to the commission members. Please, if you have any questions or anything, please go right ahead to ask Dorian or applicant. Janet, you have something?
Hi, thank you for that presentation. I remember the nuns' bread and cookies were really good when the bakery was open. I'm wondering if we pass this, what uses can the extra buildings be used for?
The buildings would all be devoted to residential purposes. So it would be kind of like a family compound, because again, it has to all be under one ownership. And it's all be owned by one person. Ownership can't be separated for the 3 units. It would be really used as like a family compound, and the structures would be used for just residential purposes.
Could the owner rent them out that buildings he wasn't living in?
Not on a short-term rental basis without coming back to you and getting some type of approval. I do know I've seen a lot of applications come before you for short-term rentals. That would require a completely separate approval. Theoretically, they could be rented for like a longer-term purpose to another entity. So if one family lived in one house, they could rent out the other house or other 2 houses, as long as it's your typical long-term, not short-term rental.
People that buy compounds have a lot of money. So
Yes, Janet, under our current regs, under 317-C 12, boarding, rooming, and lodging of quarters are by special permit allowable use.
Well, I was just wondering, since it's still a non-conforming property, if that makes any difference also.
It's just non-conforming with regard to the fact that there's 3 buildings there. So those 3 buildings would remain protected, but we'd stipulate that they'd be used for residential purposes, and most likely it would be part of a family. We envision marketing this property as a family compound. And typically, when my client tells me in that market, it would be a family with
in excess of $1 million. I mean, this is going to be high-end people that want to be around their children for the rest of their life. I'm looking for a compound myself, just not that particular area. I'm situated someplace else. And when you get that quote compound, people pay a premium for that so that they can be with their families for the rest of their life and not be split up.
And just for the record, that's Russell Cable speaking, the property owner.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. So if I could just also clarify for Commissioner Bellamy. So if there were any other uses beyond your single family residential use that would be taking place in those houses, such as a boarding house, such as a short-term rental or something else that might be allowed in the regulations, that is not protected. That would have to come to you for a separate special permit. The only thing that we're proposing right now with this conversion, the special permit conversion, is to a single family use and purposes for those homes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I get, any other questions from other members of the committee?
I've got a question.
Go ahead, Alex.
Okay, the building 3 is not complete at this time, correct? It's not a house or anything, it's still just in construction?
Correct. It's not completed yet. It's been approved as a 2-bedroom house with a chapel. As part of this conversion, obviously, since we would be making it dedicated to single family use, it would just become a 2-bedroom house, and the interior would be finished according to the approvals that we've got to date. Well, it would have to change the interior layout, but the health department approvals for a 2-bedroom house would continue for that.
We could change this.
Okay, then my other question is during the meantime, before you sell it, you're gonna start renting this out? If this is passed, you're gonna start renting these houses out right away?
What now?
I'm sorry, was there a question there? My
Yeah,
client was,
okay, I'm sorry. I'm saying if at this time now, with the house not being complete and the other house is complete, are you gonna try to rent them at this period of time until you can sell it?
well, right now, we still have some caretakers on the property in connection with the monastery that was being operated there. So I expect they're going to be staying for the foreseeable future, and at some point, we'll be looking to market the property and sell it all as one. If they leave, there's the option to rent the houses
We
until,
will not.
oh, we will not. Nope.
We will not
I'm
rent the house.
I'm being told we will not rent them, and we're just going to market the property to be sold.
Okay, thank you.
Stay there until, it's sold.
The
If
caretaker,
they want to. And
so the caretakers will stay until it's sold if they wish.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions from committee members? Now, I had said I had a couple myself, but my very sharp and intelligent commission already asked a number of those. So just to clarify, thank you for sharing when Ruby Realty acquired the property, which is 2016 from a foreclosure. The current status of the residents there as caretakers of the property. And the future plans for Ruby Realty were to simply sell the property is what's been stated.
Correct. To market the property and sell it as a family compound.
And Mr. Williams already asked the question about the septic. There is septic for each structure.
Correct. And let me, if I could just touch on that. So the current approval for the unfinished building is a 2-bedroom. It was, as I mentioned, a chapel with 2 bedrooms. There's ample land and there's ample space now that the chapel is not going to be a chapel. There's a possibility that within the existing footprint could become a 3-bedroom or maybe a 4-bedroom, depending on septic needs. That would require additional health department review and approval. But if there is any increase in bedrooms, it would all be within the same footprint, because we did represent that we would not expand the footprint of the existing 3 buildings. But they would just leave a lot of space to be used if we don't at some point explore, or either my client or a future owner doesn't explore potential another bedroom or so in that area. I just want to be clear on that.
Yeah, Dory, this is Dick Williams.
Go ahead.
It's all well and good that the current owner expresses his intent of what he would do and he would sell it. But someone else buys this in a year from now and they decide they don't want a family compound and they would rather have a multi-family complex that would be rented out. Are you going to put conditions in the bill of sale that would prohibit that from being done?
Excuse me one moment. I'm just consulting with my client.
That's fine.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you for giving me a moment to chat with my client. I guess preferably we'd like as few restrictions as possible so that we can make this as marketable as possible and hope to be able to sell the property. So we would prefer not to have to restrict long-term leases of the houses on the property just to residential, I'm sorry, just to specific family members. We do intend and think that there's a market out there for a family compound, and that's where we do intend to actively pursue it. And as I said, you're the commission and you have the right to impose conditions. That the prohibition on leasing to non-family members is not one of the conditions that we were offering, and we would hope to avoid that. But if you think it's integral, then I guess you've got some discretion there.
Yeah, Dory, I think if you look at the present housing market in Ashford, last time I looked at on Zillow, there was no houses for sale in the town. They may have changed in the past couple of weeks, but there was no houses for sale. There hasn't been a lot of interest in coming up with affordable housing, which would lend itself to, renting out properties on a single, lot.
Mhm.
So I guess, family compound sounds good, but I can't think of another family compound in the town of Ashford. The only ones I've ever heard of.
Right, we're not aware that there are any either, and we do think that that's part of the appeal, obviously to a limited clientele, but hopefully we do think that there is a market out there for it. Yeah, I guess the short answer is we would like to be able to remain as marketable as possible with as few restrictions as possible, and that's why we didn't offer that one as a restriction. But again, as part of a special permit, you're the commission, and if you deem it necessary to impose that type of a condition, then that's within your discretion. But we would like to reach as wide an audience as possible in the event that there isn't a family compound user out there.
So what you're saying, Dory, is that with one of the conditions that was offered up was the 3 existing buildings will not be separately sold or conveyed, and all
Right.
must be retained under a common ownership.
Right, but there could be, yes, exactly. So we do intend to have a common ownership. It won't be condoed and the units sold separately. But I guess to Commissioner Williams' point, you could have them all under common ownership and still have one of the people rent out one or two of the other houses there. And the house would have to be rented for single family purposes, so it'd have to be rented to a family that meets the definition in your regulations. But that could be 3 separate families as opposed to one large family using all of the 3 houses.
Anybody that's gonna buy a compound is going to want to keep their family there and not rent to others. Anybody that's gonna buy a compound is somebody that has the money to be able to do that. The only thing I could see happening, we all know that one day, or, we're not gonna live forever. And if that breadwinner was to pass away and they needed to rent one of the houses, that could be a possibility. But people that are doing compounds, they're leaving that money to their children, whatever. They don't buy compounds when they don't have a lot of money. So the odds of that happening are slim to none. But if you put restrictions on us, we're gonna sit here forever. And I mean, we're gonna work with you. I'm here to do the right thing.
Another part of your application on here has to do with a request to waive a requirement of a site plan. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you. I did mention that in my narrative, and because we're not proposing any new construction or improvements, a lot of the requirements for a site plan didn't appear to be relevant for the consideration. We're really just talking about the conversion, as I mentioned, of a non-conforming use to a more conforming non-conforming use. So that's why we've requested that waiver of those other site plan requirements. I think that between the improvement location survey that shows where the existing improvements are, that gives you what you need to evaluate the specific request in front of you. If there's other specific information that you think is pertinent and necessary, I'd welcome you to tell me, but we thought that would be enough for purposes of this limited request.
Yeah. Dory, this is Dick Williams. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you do not want to put any restrictions that would limit this to being a family compound, it sounds like you would have the ability at some point in time in the future to rent out one or more or all of these buildings as separate rentals. You're proposing that there'd be no restrictions. So I don't see that would be a precluded use of those properties. Does anyone on the commission see that differently than I?
I understand your point, Richard.
I understand your point as well. I do have another question.
Go right ahead, Janet.
So you mentioned that if the buildings are sold, they would have, minimum of the 9,000 square feet each.
90,000.
90,000, yes, thank you, 90,000. It's hard for me to see on the map, but did you figure out that if that happened, that they would all have appropriate setbacks and meet our regulations for housing?
Well, so if the property were ever reconfigured in the future and we had to do dedicate a minimum of the 270,000 square feet, that would be to a parcel that houses still the 3 houses. So the houses can't really be legally separated and conform with your regulations because they wouldn't meet the setbacks. The way that they've been permitted and constructed on the house, it would be near impossible to draw, even with some real interesting geometry, boundary lines that you could meet the side yard and rear yard setbacks in between the structures. So that's why I envision, if that was the case, we would have just come in for a subdivision so we wouldn't have this anomaly with 3 houses on one property, but we can't do that without significant variance requests. And we thought the better way to handle it was, because they are all presently existing on one property, we'll maintain that. We will dedicate, if there's ever a future re-subdivision, enough land so they can retain on one property. And they won't ever be divided apart, because it would just take too many variances and waivers in order to make that happen. And the 270,000 square feet, again, was based on 90,000 per structure, which is just coming kind of out of your regulations. And in fact, we might actually, the way the houses are configured, we might need even more than that in order to ever carve off some land, because we have to make sure that the houses would also have the supporting septic systems that they have now, with the reserve areas, the driveway access. So it's very possible that, you know, we would need more acreage than just the 270,000 square feet if we were to ever carve anything off. And again, the reason I'm proposing that as a condition is because I'm familiar with case law that says you can't put a condition saying that you can never re-subdivide the property. That's just an illegal condition based on case law. If someone comes to you with a subdivision plan that complies with your zoning regs, so if we could build another carve off a conforming lot, you'd have no choice but to approve that. So that's what the cases say. That's why you can't prohibit it. So I just wanted to make sure, if that ever did happen in the future, that there'd be sufficient land, a minimum quantity of sufficient land in order to support these 3 houses still retaining on one parcel.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mike, could you put up the plot plan again to help visualize what Dory's talking about?
Yep. So I don't know, I can start with this. I'm not sure if that's easier. It's not the site plan, but it shows the buildings. Is that better or worse?
Oh, I see.
That's better, Mike. That's what I've been looking at to understand the drawing. Because the drawing is very pixelated.
Yeah.
So what we are seeing is going up the right side of the, from down to the upper right-hand corner, that would be Seacar Road.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then the driveways in the lower portion, the access driveways in the lower portion, the lower corner there.
Right. Yep. There's the first house, second
Yep.
house, and then the chapel's the building you can see most clearly.
And whereas we know that the St. Joseph house the second house has kitchen capabilities, obviously, are those also in the, I know it hasn't been completed, but are plans for it to have kitchen facilities and such?
What was there a question in there about kitchen facilities?
Yeah, the chapel building itself. Again, I know the St. Joseph building had some type of kitchen facilities because that's where they did the baking and such.
Both
and I'm
St.
just-
Mary's and St. Joseph's House, both of those have kitchen facilities. The chapel
Right.
building does not yet, just because the interior hasn't been finished yet.
But there are.
But it was proposed in the guest house to have kitchen facilities.
Thank you. Other questions from the commission?
Jeff, it's Alex. Have we ran this by our land use attorney? And has he given us any input on this?
Well, I haven't talked to him. Dory has talked to him, and I know
have.
Mike was involved in that. Mike, can you share some of Ken's input on this?
Yeah, so this originally, I can't even remember now, how it originally came across my desk, but it's kind of where it started. And after reviewing the file and seeing kind of the correspondence and how the property had morphed over time, the initial request that came before me, it was not a clear path forward. So then the property owner got Dory involved, and she spoke with Ken about sort of what the options were and if it made the most sense to go before a special permit with you guys instead of going to the ZBA. And, you know, a lot of it involves the sort of unclear path from how we got to where things were maybe a decade or so ago to where they are now, because there is correspondence from the Planning and Zoning Commission that says we're a little concerned that this might become a problem in the future. But then almost immediately afterwards, staff issued permits, did inspections, and said, go ahead and build the thing that the Planning and Zoning Commission said they had some concerns over. So I was sort of in between, what do you do? And you know, the owner at the time obtained all the necessary and required permits. It's just that there's a disconnect. So Ken spoke with Dory, and they agreed that this was the most appropriate path forward.
Okay. So at this point, we always can come back a little bit too, but I'd just like to find out if there's any further questions from the commission on this. And again, if we were to, well, let's just, if I don't see any further questions from the commission, we will open it up for public comment at this point.
I got one more question.
Sure,
Jeff,
Alex.
If we want to put stipulations on that, we can put them on anytime if before passing or anything on this, correct? Because I feel that, you know, we have to worry about someone selling this property and just becoming just big, large rental property, apartments as you could be. So
Yeah,
just wanna make
I
sure-
I fully understand what you're saying, and yeah, I'd like to see, you know, should this follow through. I would also like to see certain conditions and requirements that go with the property, as opposed to the, you know, the agreement of the current owner and things not following through on that. Again, you know, some compromise of maybe where it's not causing difficulties for the current owner to get the property sold, which is what his wish is to do.
Could I
Okay, at
just,
this,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
could I just make
No.
a quick comment? I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. When you say we want to make sure it doesn't get sold as doesn't get rented as apartments, I do want to be clear. The individual houses will each have to be used as single, what we're proposing would have to be used for single family purposes. So that means there'd be the worst case scenario, I think in your mind would be there'd be 3 houses and 3 separate families in there, but you couldn't have one house, like let's say the new chapel with two bedroom. If that ever gets finished out with maybe even more than 2 bedrooms, if they get health department approval for that, that couldn't be split up into multiple units. That would still just be a building for single family purposes. Same with the St. Mary's house and the St. Joseph's house. They wouldn't be internally split up into apartment units within the buildings. Each building would be rented for single family purposes in the worst case if it didn't remain a family compound. I just want to make sure that didn't get lost.
Well, that's also where we get into the definition we currently have in our regs when it comes to family versus non-familial relationship for a single family dwelling, correct?
Well, yes, a single family dwelling is and I don't have your regs right in front of me, I apologize, but a single family dwelling is to be occupied by a family, however you define family. So that would be limited to one family per dwelling. But I didn't want, I think Commissioner Bellamy also had rented or referenced boarding houses or rooming houses, or somebody referenced that. It wouldn't become a situation where we would break up the houses into individual separate rentals, boarding rooms, and just rent a room out or what have you. It would be one family per structure. Again, in the worst case, if it's not one family for the entire compound.
Well, I guess the only thing that we have here is where Mr. Cable, is it?
Yes, my client.
With his statement, and I'm right now taking him at his word, obviously, is that his intent would be to sell it to someone looking to do a family compound type of thing. However, once he has sold it without any type of conveyance, without any type of condition, then that person who does own it would have the ability to potentially rent those other sites on there. Should they take a turn, their family decides they want to be in Colorado and not in Connecticut or whatever it is, they would still have that because Mr. Cable no longer has control of that property. He's sold that.
You're
right,
right.
so to speak.
You are right, Mr. Chairman. Without a specific condition, a future owner could choose to no longer use it as a family compound and rent each structure separately to a single family. But again, if they ever wanted to do something more intense than that, they would need other approvals to come back and then break up the interior units within the 3 buildings. And that would require your oversight. But just to rent it to 3 separate families wouldn't require your oversight without a condition. We do think that the market's there, and that would drive the price to a point where my client would be comfortable to recoup some of the lost investment he's got on this property, is to sell it as a family compound. But you are correct. Absent a formal restriction that the entire property has to be used by a single family, there would still be the ability to rent the 3 houses separately in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we talked about setbacks between the 3 dwellings. What about the neighbors? It looks like this is, hundreds of feet remote from the neighbors.
It is, Mr. Williams. And yes, there's no issue at all with setbacks from the exterior property lines. And I'm also told, just interestingly, a fair portion of the land to the rear of the houses is wetlands. So that would most likely be undevelopable in the future anyway. So even if the property was ever re-subdivided, as we have talked about, that would kind of be undevelopable land and most likely just stay with these 3 houses as well, thereby increasing the size dedicated to these 3 houses even beyond the 270,000 square feet minimum that I had offered as the condition.
Can I just say something quickly?
Sure, Mike.
So to be explicit, so our regulations don't allow multifamily. So they can't, there really is not much they could do here without having to come back before you. To be explicit in the way in which they are suggesting these properties be used, you could consider a condition along the lines of no more than 3 single-family dwelling units shall be established on the property without prior approval from the commission. What that means is they're locked into 3 dwelling units. I really, really, really do not think that we should go down the road of trying to establish a familial relationship between occupants. No. So it's just not a good idea, and it's not something we do anywhere else. And the occupants of the properties now are not really being monitored in any way by anybody. But what that would do is prevent anybody who purchases the property in the future from saying, oh, well, I can turn one of the properties into 2 apartments and get some rental income, and I'll live in the other one or something along those lines. So just food for thought.
Well, under our in-law apartment, if the building would be so configurable, you could remodel one of the buildings such that it would have an in-law apartment, and that could be rentable too.
But Mr. Williams, again, I don't have your regs in front of you, but wouldn't an in-law apartment be required to be to a family member, and the other
Yeah.
family member would have to live in the main house?
Yeah, it certainly does now.
Yep.
And we've been so long, Mike, and going back and talking about your affordable housing plan,
Mhm.
but that affordable housing plan could open up a lot of things that we're kind of skirting around here in this discussion. Am I?
I think that I'd have to look exactly, but I'm not sure the in-law apartment would apply here because that is accessory to a single family dwelling, and this is not a single family dwelling on a lot. This is 3 single family dwellings on a lot. It's a non-conforming use. So I think we have some flexibility if the commission was really opposed to that, to say you've got 3 dwelling units on a lot, and we're not going to allow you to expand the nonconformity by establishing an accessory dwelling unit. So I think that is a position the commission reserves the right to take down the road if you felt accessory dwelling units on this particular property would not be appropriate. And I'm riffing it just based on what I'm looking at in the regs, but this is still, and Dory will stop me if I'm wrong, this will still be treated as a non-conforming use. So it will be restricted from any future expansion, as she said. And so I think the commission could take the approach that even an accessory dwelling unit, or in-law as we call them, would be an expansion of that and would not be allowed.
Yes, I do agree with you, Mike, that this would still be a non-conforming use, which would prohibit expansions. And as we said, we would agree, we already offered that we wouldn't expand the or enlarge the existing footprints, but we would also agree that as a condition that we also wouldn't expand to include any accessory dwelling units to any of the 3 existing single-family homes there. We would be comfortable offering that.
Thank you, Dory. Any other comments from the commission at this point?
If I might make a chance at summarizing, the applicant does not want to place any restrictions on the sale. He would like to market it as a family compound, but that's not to say that the individual housing units could not be rented out to separate parties that would not be part of this family compound. Is that correct?
That is our preference. But again, it's an approval under a special permit, and you have the ability to require conditions if you feel otherwise. But I did hear Mike D'Amato suggest that you could say there could be no more than 3 single-family dwelling units permitted on the property. But we agree with that. It's kind of consistent with what we've said. But if you feel the need to take it further than that and further restrict it, that's not our wish, but that's your prerogative.
Okay, so I'll open this up to public comment. I do see Paul Varga with a hand up. Paul, are you available? And did you want to speak?
All right, there you go, Jeff. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right, yeah. So originally I was on here about this, but about something else. But when you guys started talking about the rental thing, and Dick mentioned the family compound not existing in Ashford, I happen to have a family compound on the other side of the street from this and down the road from you. Mine just happens to be a lot bigger. I already have 2 buildings. So this kind of thing is in a lot of ways important to me and near and dear to me. I would love to see more families stay in Ashford. Having said that, when I purchased my grandmother's house after her passing, I did rent it so that I could pay for it. That's how I paid for it. Now my son lives in it. So I think putting restrictions on this compound, if you will, just because the buildings are so close together, they've already offered to make them, or they've agreed that they'll only be single family residences. And I don't see a problem with that at all. I think I agree with Mike. It's a road that I don't think that the PZC should be going down. Now, I'll get to why I was actually here. That driveway is terrible. So my concern is, as emergency services and fire chief, is there something we can do with this to make sure that the driveway can be addressed so we can actually get in there for 3 families? When the monastery was there, it was very limited to the religious use. And when they did have a function, it was a very small gathering. We knew the date and we knew the players. But families have different generations and a number of people. There's another applicant later on tonight that has a driveway issue that was brought to my attention. And this one wasn't. So I just want to know if there's something that can be somehow that can be addressed. So there's appropriate spots they had a turnaround at one point, a small parking lot up top at one point. If that could be addressed either in the sale or pre-sale, so that we can make sure we have access for fire trucks and emergency vehicles, etc. Also, when they built the chapel, as I recall, the original access for the chapel was going to be a separate road around the back. And when they ran out of funds and abandoned the construction, that all kind of fell by the wayside. I don't know if that's something that somebody would be interested in exploring again, but that would certainly be something that could be looked at. I'm not saying I would necessarily want or require that. I'm just saying that just an ambulance up there is very difficult. Putting any other kind of apparatus would be very, very difficult. And I don't want to see somebody, or the service be delayed or denied because we can't get up the driveway or in the driveway. So that was my original purpose for being here. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Jeff,
And it does give us, excuse me, Dick, it does give us some pause also because this is kind of a, I don't know what you want to call it, a developed subdivision that's not a developed subdivision. I mean,
Yeah, it's an interesting scenario, right? The original purpose of it was fantastic. I basically was there multiple times as a kid and a member of the Catholic Church. So I watched it grow and develop and be used as a monastery. And now we have this interesting thing, but so as it grew, nobody really thought about what would happen to it. The PZC did talk about it when they built the chapel. I wasn't involved as heavily then as I am now, so I wasn't involved in that conversation. It's kind of a subdivision that's not really a subdivision. My compound, if you will, is spread out over half a mile, where this is all clustered, which is, again, it leaves the rest of that 24 acres opened up. It's a fantastic concept. It just didn't get planned out. I don't want to say appropriately. It just didn't get planned out well, I guess is the right way to say it.
No, and for that matter, the follow through also, because there is a road there that was started another off of CCAR to get up
Right.
there, but now
Right.
again, never completed due to activity and funds. And
Well,
such.
I think that was a financial thing, and you can't blame that on the current owner that he purchased
no.
it as is. So yeah.
No, absolutely. Thank you.
But that, and
Thank you,
and
Paul.
I actually, one of my other things when I first saw this was, I had thought about, is it setting a precedent? But we don't have this problem. Like I said, this is and you said it's a unique situation. So there's not many buildings around or properties around where they have clusters of that many buildings that are inhabitable. So.
Okay.
Yeah, Jeff,
Yes,
we
Dick.
would require a special permit for this to happen. And couldn't we, as part of that special permit process, require that they upgrade the road to be safe from a fires and emergency vehicle viewpoint?
Yeah, we would have the option to look into that too, especially with the input from our fire department.
May I ask a question? We just have, as long as Mr. Vargas here, Chief Vargas here, just for clarification, with regard to the condition of the driveway, my client would just like to address that real quick and get some clarification.
The condition of the driveway is actually very good. It's very smooth. It's just like driving in. I mean, there's no potholes. It's clear, it's wide. And if you look at this plan, as you're coming up the driveway, just when you get to the first house, there's a big circle there. It's big enough. It's a parking lot. It's already there. Somebody, a fire truck has to come in there. They're all set. It's
So-
already there.
So is the concern from the chief that there's no turnaround for the truck, or the passability of the actual driveway that's there? Because it sounds like the driveway's
So the
in
driveway
good
itself,
shape.
you are correct. The driveway, condition of the driveway itself is adequate. But if you park cars in front of the houses, in the area in front of the house, when the ambulance itself, just the ambulance is there, there's no space to turn around.
Just like an area.
So unless they've made a change
There's a
recently,
couple cars parked.
in the
Everybody
last
parks over here.
couple months, and then just a fire truck is obviously far larger. So I don't want a giant space. I just want a place that we can get into and turn around safely. And then the other thing is that in any multi-drive or shared driveway configuration now, and the new regulations, and Mike can correct me, but there's some requirements. And I'm not even proposing that we bring it up to that code. I'm just saying that, can we look at that? That driveway is already very steep. It was built pre to what the new regulation is. So I've been in there myself with multiple apparatus, and it's a difficult place to be in and out of. So that's just, I'm just voicing my concern. It's up to the PZC to look at it and decide if it's valid. But I'd be happy to go up there and look at it with somebody if they'd like to.
Thank you, Paul. Any other comments from the public? Let me page over, make sure I'm not missing anyone. Okay, hearing nothing from the public on that. Before I have Dory with her final statement on this, I'd want to just reach out to the commission members. If you have any questions or any concerns or anything you want to bring up, this is the time to do it with the applicant.
I would say the one thing that we would add into the special permit requirement is that Paul basically scope out the driveway and see that it meets the needs that he would recommend as the fire chief.
So we would need to know what those recommendations are to put it into any type of conveyance or issues. But yes, that would be helpful for us for that concern. Again, it is a very special situation, as Dory has pointed out. It's not quite like anything else we have in town, and we've got the multiple buildings on a small area. I've been up there before, and I can understand Paul's concern when it comes to any type of cars parked up there and what that means for getting in and out with emergency vehicles, especially a fire truck at this point. So it is something for us to consider, because we do have rigs that have requirements for access and turnarounds and things like that. But again, even with a multi a shared driveway or something like that, there are requirements for us to look at. Um,
And then one
and
last,
also, I just wanted to state that I think that one of the things we'll be wanting to do is consult with Ken regarding both upside and downside and what that would leave us with. So that's something that we will probably want to do in our deliberations when it comes to that. You were going to say, Dick, I'm sorry.
yeah, and it's just, again, to summarize, even though he's going to market it as a family compound, there is going to be no restrictions that would prohibit the renting out of the individual single-family homes.
As there would be for, no one else having multiple homes and such. Okay, so Dory, we'll open it up to you for final statements to the commission.
Yes, thank you. I do appreciate those comments of Chief Varga, both with regard to the fact that he's got a similar situation with a compound there, and there could be some valid and legitimate reasons for perhaps from time to time renting the property to a non-family member, as Chief Varga had mentioned as well. But with regard to the driveway access, if you yes, it's important to be able to ensure emergency access to all homes, whether existing or proposed. And these are existing homes there. But we would be happy as a condition of approval to consult with the fire marshal and provide or the fire chief and provide reasonable emergency access and turnarounds for the emergency apparatus on the property. I don't think that we have to build a brand new driveway to any common driveway standards or anything. But I don't think that that's what he's suggesting either. I think that we could talk offline as a condition of approval, maybe prior to the issuance of any permits to finish the final building. We would have to have that in order and make reasonable improvements as that they may require. Other than that, it's an interesting situation. It took a lot of brainstorming with both Mike D'Amato and your town attorney, Ken Slater. I think we did come up with a solution and a path forward to make this a property that can actually be usable and marketable by my client, but also make it a bit more conforming with the neighborhood. So we hope that you'll favorably grant this permit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. With no more statement and no more comment from the commission, I'm looking for a motion to close the hearing for PZ-23-3 at this point.
Can I just say one thing before you
Sure,
move
Mike.
on? I know we've been going on a while. So just to be clear, if you close the public hearing, the only thing you can do is issue an approval, if that's the way you go, with a condition that they upgrade the driveway per the statements that Chief Varga made. If you would like for there to be a dialogue between the chief and the property owner to determine what those might be, you'd need to keep the hearing open so that you can receive that at the next meeting and proceed accordingly. So I'm not telling you which one I think you should do, but we
No,
can't.
I appreciate that.
Okay, I just want to
Yeah.
make sure
No,
that.
I appreciate that. So as opposed to looking for a motion, we would probably like to continue this hearing for both consulting with legal counsel and also gaining some input from Paul and the property owner as to what's a viable solution.
Motion to continue the hearing. Is that what you need?
Janet, I'll second it.
Second, okay. Those in favor of hearing continuance?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so we will continue the hearing until our meeting in May 8th.
Thank you for your time. We'll see
Dory,
you
Mr.
in
Cable,
May.
thank you very much.
Thanks.
And we'll make sure that through the land use office and Mike, that Chief Varga gets in touch with Mr. Cable and or his staff and experts.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, having closed that hearing, we'll move on to our next hearing. PZ-23-4. the application for short-term rental at 7 Amadon Drive per Article 317D. Owner applicant is P. Marque.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear
Hello,
me?
Mr. Marque.
Yeah, how's it going?
Again, we'll open it up to a statement from the applicant regarding their application for the short-term rental.
Yes. Hey, you doing? My name is Peter Marcoux. I'm new to the town of Ashford. As you can see, obviously my closer neighbors can tell that we did renovations to the house. My job consists of me working away majority of the time, but I'll be home at least 6 months to a year. I prefer not to disclose what I do for a living. Yes, I do renovations, but I also have another job that's my main source of income. So when I'm away, I would prefer to be able to rent the house out. I do have contracts that I can go over 30 days that I don't have to be at this meeting for. I prefer not to do that. I work very closely with other Wounded Warrior projects that I prefer to use the house for mitigation of use for other soldiers as well. And that's why I apply for the special permit and go forth with that. And that's all.
Okay, very good. And I looked at, you had shared your plans with us, correct? I believe as part of our
Yes.
materials for the meeting.
Yes, you have provided, I provided the layout of the house, obviously driveway that's soon to be done here. And then obviously plot plan that was fully surveyed, A2 survey. Anything else that was required by me that obviously and Mike brought up, I presented to the town.
Okay. Mike, are you able to call up the plot plan?
Yep, 1 second.
Thank you.
Hold on, I gotta flip it. There we go.
Okay. So we have an existing dirt driveway and you say that's being worked on, Mr. Marque?
Yes. Yeah, so obviously in front of the house right now, my neighbors know, there's a roll of stabilization fabric. The topsoil, obviously wetlands permits have been applied for, approved. Zoning, Mike knows about the driveway layout, and that's been approved by him. Stabilization fabric will be applied and then stone driveway on top of the stabilization fabric. So.
Okay.
And currently, I'm able to fit 2 of my full-size trucks plus my trailer. Compact vehicles, easily 4.
Jeff, I have a question.
Yes, Jerry, go right ahead.
For the driveway, because it's on an association road, he has to get permission to make any changes to the driveway from the board of directors.
I'm
Because
not
we
sure
have,
what the change of the driveway is, other than applying for or putting a driveway in, since it's currently topsoil.
okay, but you still have to, if there's a change to your driveway, you have to talk to the board of directors, which I'm a member of.
Okay. So what's the change of the driveway? Taking out topsoil and putting stone down?
The grade of it, If it's,
There's no grade change.
okay. But,
It's all been shot with
yeah,
A2 surveyor.
well, it's just to, make sure it's done properly. That's all, just like the town.
Well, again, though we don't want to overstep, Mike has looked at the plans for this from a town standpoint. So what the Lake Association is requiring is not a matter for our consideration at this point.
Okay. Yep.
So thank you.
And I just want to point out that the purposes of reviewing the driveways, because now that we have standards for the Lake District, we regulate the total coverage.
Right.
And so we had to make sure that what he was doing was not going to increase the coverage on the lot.
So you said that you would be in residence greater than or approximately 6 months out of the year, Mr. Mercure?
Yes, I tend to take off when I have to leave. It's greater than 90 days, but majority of the time, that will be my new residence. Going forth probably sometime in May, as I'm away currently. But yes, when I'm away greater than 90 days, I'd prefer to be able to rent it out to, like I said, I have other soldiers that would like to utilize the lake, and it's more of an oasis to help other individuals like myself to have a place to go. This isn't going to be just a straight open Airbnb frenzy for anybody. It's highly regulated. Obviously, my neighbors would know through the whole process of doing renovations that were there. Everything was very well kept, picked up every day, and that's how my property should be kept every day. So I held a high standard at work, and I hold a high standard for my house, and where everything's going to be utilized and who's going to be utilizing the house.
Janet and Mark, I'm leaning heavily on you as authors of the short-term rental for further questions or clarifications.
Well, I had a few questions. You didn't give us any information about your house. How many bedrooms and bathrooms do you have, and how many people are you anticipating would be living there, using it?
It's 2-bedroom, 2-bath house. At any given time, we usually do groups of 4 within our group therapy sessions. And at that time, if I was to rent out the house to one of these groups, it'd be a maximum of 4 people.
And since you mentioned wounded warriors, I was just wondering, have you made it accessible with ADA standards, with grab bars? Do you have ramps and so forth?
No, so if I was to do, it's more of a mental state of mind with wounded warriors. Not every wounded warrior is handicapped and accessible to that. We do have grab bars within the showers, but I don't know how to word this from somebody that's not a wounded warrior, but most wounded warriors want to be self-sufficient. They want to be able to be an individual that's not persisted as handicapped. So for us to apply all these things and make it handicap accessible, it's actually better for a warrior to be able to fight their way into a house and be able to utilize and have self-sustaining. Obviously, there's a group of 4 for a reason. If they do need help, the help will be there. But I mean, even my best friend is in a wheelchair that you'll see on that property, and I've been around it for many, many years, to the point where a lot of people do like to assist, and it actually mentally crushes them for somebody else to help them out 24/7. So no, we don't have it as fully handicap accessible, but it is an oasis for them to be able to utilize it. And if it needed to, then I would go back to the meeting, be able to get handicap ramps and everything accessibly, but I do not see that at this time being needed.
We don't have a requirement of that from
Okay.
a town standpoint for your activity as a short-term rental. However, as an unhosted short-term rental,
Yep.
you have an agent available someone who would look after the property or help the individual or monitor the rental going on?
Yes. I have somebody, one road back, I believe was the first road in off of the main drag there on the right-hand side. But I do have 2 people that live very close to the property that will be watching the property. And it's actually one of the main reasons those people are friends of mine for over 20 years and a reason why I purchased this property in the first place. I don't have many relatives in this area, and I wanted somebody to be able to watch over this property 24/7 even when I was gone.
And you do know that there is a limitation in the unhosted situation for accommodations of no more than 3 times during a 6-month period.
Okay.
Okay, and that's not located under the short-term rental section. You'll find that in the definition section of our zoning regs, if that helps out.
Okay. Not a problem.
Other questions from committee members?
If there is an agent, we don't require that they be named anywhere?
Well, I imagine it would be indicated. Mike, help me out. Is this would that be indicated on our permit?
I mean, I don't think we've had a situation where the agent was not the owner, so we would certainly ask them to provide that. I mean, we could have Mr. Marquardt give us that information, when he filed the special permit.
I would also
Okay.
provide it anyways, in case of emergency of the house and I wasn't around, for somebody to be able to contact, God forbid, if there's a fire, emergency, whatever the case is. I would definitely be able to document it with the town, like I've done prior with my last residence, just in case.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, wait, did I hear something? Jerry, yes, go ahead. Oh, I thought you were going to say something, Jerry. I'm sorry. Okay, so if there's no questions from the commission at this point, we'll open it up to public comment. Oh, I'm sorry, Jeff, you had a question.
Yeah, you stated it's your intention to rent to Wounded Warriors. Is that exclusive, or would the property be open to anybody that wanted to rent it?
Well, in Discrimination Act, I believe I'd have to keep it open to all. Obviously, I don't have to accept anybody if I didn't want to. My main logic here is for soldiers that are looking to have an oasis away from home and a place to go. Many enjoy fishing, many enjoy ice fishing, many enjoy paddle boarding. It's the big thing that we have been incorporating in a surf team out in Rhode Island that I'm a part of, and I just felt it'd be beneficial for us to be able to have something that's a little bit closer than having to drive an hour and 45 minutes away.
Are you offering this through a program of any type, like a Verbo or Airbnb?
I believe it. I probably will list it on there. Like I said, my main objective is not to. My main objective would be to address it towards soldiers and others. But yes, it will be provided to the websites and Verbo and Airbnb.
I see. Okay. Okay, I'm not making an assumption now. I just want to make sure. Is there anything from the commission that needs to be asked before I open up to public comment? Not seeing anything. We'll open it up to public comment regarding the short-term rental at 7 Amadon. Wave at me, send me an electric hand. We'll go with first one in, Star Potts.
Hi, I live at 10 Amadon right across the street. And Pete, I think you've done a great job on the house. It looks really great. And you all have been incredibly respectful and quiet, and I appreciate that. I do have some concerns and questions. Particularly if you're putting it on Airbnb and Verbo, that we really don't want a party house across the street. And if there is a problem, I would want to know what, I mean, you say you have an agent. I think I met your friends that were over here this weekend. I can't remember their names, but I would want to have somebody that we could contact if there was any, any partying that was really, disturb the peace or the serenity of a lake. So that would be one thing that I would ask. That's one question. And
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yes. I believe you met Nick this past weekend.
Yes, I did.
Yes. So Nick lives obviously one road away. And obviously I would 100%, you guys have been very amazing to deal with as neighbors too. And 100% obviously have emergency contact info. One thing I do with the house, I don't know if you saw at the beginning, that I had security cameras around the job. So I know when anybody's on that house 24/7. And in regards to loud noise and everything, I do have, it will be set up with noise monitoring systems. That will obviously alert Nick just in case people did get out of hand. I never had an experience with, in the last 12 years of being part of these members and these groups, that anything was getting out of hand. And as far as like, yeah, I'll just keep it simple as that. Most people that get away, that want an oasis, are just calm, cool, and collective, looking for peace.
Okay.
But God forbid, you didn't need to have a contact. I 100% trust you guys to be there, like we talked from the beginning, over almost a year ago now.
Okay. And you said something about it being therapy groups. Is this going to be like a retreat for people that is structured, or is it just a rental?
It's obviously it's a rental perspective, and that's why I have to say that, because I mean, it doesn't matter if I'm collecting revenue or not. Obviously, revenue is a business, and non-revenue is non-profit. So people are going in and out. It's going to draw a question. This is why I went that route. Even if I didn't charge 90% of these people, different people going in and out, obviously neighbors are going to drive awareness to say, hey, this is being utilized as short-term rental. Obviously, I don't have to disclose any revenue perspectives, but that's the only reason I went with the short-term route, just to alert the neighbors, say, hey, we do have people coming in and out here. Yes, it's going to be utilized as more of a therapy session for people to utilize the lake and access of that. We will have all of our own paddle boards staying at the lake as well, so nobody else is going to be bringing anything else in. And I just set it up as that and as such. So it's not going to be party central by any means. And God forbid if it is, then I'll be coming home. So to address that. But
Okay. Well, my only concern was that if you put it on Airbnb or VRBO, then you start to lose control. But also, it's if you're only renting it 3 times in a 6-month period, then that limits it. It's just people coming in and out and really not being that invested in the property is my main concern.
yeah, and I mean, as how nice a house is, I'd be beyond upset as well if it got loud and out of control. So
Yeah,
I built this as
Yeah, I'm thrilled to hear you're going to be living there, Pete, because that makes a good
Yep.
neighbor. I do hope that you know and that you let the vets know that if anybody has any startle response. I mean, I'm a trauma therapist, so if
okay.
anybody has a startle response, the fireworks in the summer on the lake are intense. So to
That's
just be
what we've been told as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that's the other thing.
Thank
So-
you. I appreciate the heads up.
So as long as we've got some contact person, then I think we're good. Thank you.
Absolutely. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Potts. I just wanted to say, we let this go a little bit different than we have with a number of our other hearings. Normally, again, comments are directed to the committee to address, but in this case, when it comes to these rentals and the importance of the lake community, I'm not going to be such a rule monger on this. And, I'd rather have some of the questions answered right away by the applicant there from the committee. So again, another recourse for the surrounding neighbors and such, though it is after the fact, is you can always, if something were to happen, you can always register a complaint with the zoning enforcement officer. And again, in maintaining someone's permit, we will look at this. They get a 1-year permit, and then it's reviewed. And if there are complaints or anything like that, when the review comes up, then the commission has the ability to revoke the permit because order was not maintained or whatever the situation was that the neighbors had to face. So there are a couple of outlet venues to go down.
Thank you. That's very helpful to know.
Okay. Other public comment? Mr. Panic.
Good evening. I just wanted to comment, being a member of the association and an alternate on the board. The board had some questions about this house a couple of months ago when the remodeling started, with permitting and lack of permitting, and possibly a cease and desist order on the building of the home because it was being done under a different permit. And I don't have personal knowledge, but there's been quite a bit of talk on the lake that there was a cease and desist and the building inspector wasn't able to enforce it and the building continued. And I want to just make sure that all of those items have been taken care of, and the correct permitting to put this house up was done. I think it's very important that we maintain that. There was a second point is when the commission mentioned to the applicant that on a short-term rental, you can only rent 3 times in a 6-month period. He seemed a little surprised. He seemed a little like maybe he wasn't aware of that. And I appreciate the fact of who he's trying to rent it out, and I commend him for that. But regulations are there to be regulations. So if he's going to be there 6 months in a day, living there, as an applicant who says he's going to be there 6 months in a day in his primary residence, which is a point that I know the P&Z is working on. I'm not sure if that had been finished yet, but if it is going to be his primary residence and he's going to be there 6 months in a day and he ships off for his job and it's a 9-month stay or a 6-month stay, he would only, and rightfully so, he still could be your residence. But he would only have the opportunity to rent it 3 times in a 6-month period, which would only mean 6 times in an entire year. And it's very easy to check on Airbnb and Vrbo when people start leaving, thumbs up that the place was great. And to the other lake resident that lives across the street, I would hate for that neighbor or any other neighbor to all of a sudden have more than 3 in a 6-month period. And I was hoping that the applicant understood that, you just can't rent it out. Long-term you could, but if you're going for a short-term permit, you're limited as to how many times you can rent it out. And the residence thing is certainly a problem. We had another Airbnb approved at the lake, and there's a pretty good inclination that the person that got the permit for the short-term rental months ago does not live at the property. So, I know it's, unless it's been finished since the last time I was on the meeting, there's still permanent residence issues. And I just want to make sure that the zoning commission, clarifies very clear with the current owner of those, restrictions about living there and how many times you can rent it out. Even if it is your primary residence, if your work takes you away for 9 months, I guess it could still be a permanent residence. But that doesn't allow you, just because you're not there for 9 months, to rent it out more times than the regulations allow. And I would want to make sure that he's very clear on that. Those are some of the things. And again, just to circle back, I just want to make sure that the building department, or maybe Mr. D'Amato, has some info on that. But I'm fairly confident there was a cease and desist because he had the wrong permits, and I'm not sure that that was all taken care of. So I think at a minimum, the planning and zoning would want to make sure that the house that was taken down and the new one putting up, was permitted correctly, has been inspected by the building inspector. Because there's been a lot of work on that house, and it looks nice, but it still has, meet the current guidelines of the building department and make sure that all of that was done and the cease and desist was taken care of because, just want to make sure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mike. And again, I would just like to say that we have had the primary residence definition discussion on our agenda a couple times, and we've had to table it due to, again, some larger pending matters that we were dealing with. And we will be dealing with that on our May 8th meeting. We've met with our legal counsel, and I think we have a definition that we can all get behind for primary residence. Mike, do you have any comment to the building inspection at this point? And if you don't, that's fine.
So a cease and desist order would come from zoning. I have not issued a cease and desist order. Building officials issue, if they issue anything, it would be a stop work order. I do not have the details on where anything stands with that. There were some permits, and I know that the property owner was working with both Lynette and Randy, the building official, on additional permits and approvals that were, and reviews that were necessary. I am not in that loop enough to know exactly where that stands, but it would not be beyond the scope of what we're dealing with here to issue an approval contingent on all necessary building and health approvals being obtained before any rentals commenced.
I'm sorry, could you say it
Mike,
again,
if
Mike?
you don't mind.
I'm sorry,
was
who's
that?
talking?
If you
on
want,
this.
I can step in, Mike, and yeah, Mike, if you want me, I can just step in and explain real quick of what happened in the beginning of the process of all the permits to put everybody's mind at rest. At the beginning of the
Right ahead.
project, we applied for all of our permits, did the online system. Obviously, this was probably almost a year ago now. When we did all the permits, uploaded everything online, the building and everything was approved at that point. When we started working on the house several months later, the online permitting system went down that showed that we had no permits. It drew up a whole stink of people asking questions. Why don't we have permits for anything? I was able to bring documentation showing that we paid for permits, we uploaded permits, and I was able to hover over one portion of our online permitting system to bring up a brief description of what we applied for permitting. From that point, we all agreed on building and zoning side that the online system did go down, that we weren't able, to this day, we're still not able to open up the original permit that I applied for majority of the renovations. Going forth, one thing that we wanted to do was get the E2 survey done, so the original footprint was non-changed, and Mike was able to grandfather the original footprint into place. The other thing with Lynette was when we first bought the house, there was 3 bedrooms. We brought it back down to 2 bedrooms to make it conforming again. One of the other things with health and zoning, they said that it was a seasonal house. It was confirmed that it was a year-round house. There was a lot of misinformation that was going through the system. To this day, all the permitting has been applied for. Randy has signed off on all rough-in permits, signing or any permits that need to be signed off and inspected to the state has been done and complied with. I have provided engineering plans, engineering for surveying, engineering for the building. If anybody had any other questions, you can see everything now is uploaded onto the online system and free for all to take a look at. Spent thousands of dollars doing this just to make sure that everybody was on the same page. I had no problem doing it at the beginning. And like I said, I did it at the beginning. The online system glitched out. It was not my fault. It wasn't building's fault. We had to resubmit everything and we moved forward at the same time. There was never a cease and desist on the property. I'm not sure where that information came from. There was a stop work order for the permits to be readdressed. That has happened. That's where we're at. The property is still not completed. It will be completed in the next month or so, but that's where we're at with the building. So everything was conformed and has been applied, has been paid for, has been zoned, and has building official permits signed off.
Thank you, Mr. Marquardt.
Yes.
Other public comment? Oh, Mike, yes.
I just want to clarify, cease and desist, I may have misspoke that it was a cease and desist. It definitely was a stop work order for sure. So I want to just clarify that for the applicant. And I apologize for calling it a cease and desist. The only other question I would have is, since he says now that the property won't be done for another month, is it premature to ask for a short-term rental when the property does not have a CO yet? That's just a question if we're, if this can be voted on by this board at this time, with the house not, having a CO and final inspection by, the health department, the the building department and so on. And I'm not suggesting that there's anything wrong with it. I'm just wondering if, once you give them approval and then the inspector comes in and said there's a problem or something's not right, then are you out of order in the sense that the process is out of order? I'm just curious. Thanks.
Thank you.
I mean, if the building official denies a permit, obviously the house is bringing up to compliance prior to being rented out. So nobody would be able to live in the house. I don't think how a short-term being being ahead of the game by having this license completed would be any term of when the CO were to happen to be able to start everything right away. I don't understand how, other than your opinion, would make sense on that.
Well, I say in all due respect, if the town building department issued a stop work order, but they also knew that the system was down and that it was their fault, why would they issue a stop work order and then not just get the permit straightened out? I mean, they went to the point of making a stop work order because obviously something was happening that they weren't aware of. So I just think
that'd be a great question to ask. But what happened was you did a stop work order. Everybody was asking questions. There's your questions answered. The questions were answered by all the permitting being reapplied. That's all that happened.
From a planning and zoning perspective, we can go ahead and issue our permit contingent upon A, B, C, D, and those contingencies can be including occupancy, correct inspections, and all the like. So you could not rent it out until those were done. I'm not sure, and Jeff, you can definitely override me on this, but I'm not sure that planning and zoning would require this to be put off and then take this to a second hearing just for those items to be checked off.
No, and for that matter, Mike, what's our time frame at this point? Should the hearing close tonight?
If you close the hearing tonight, you have 65 days to issue a decision, but we no matter what we're dealing with, we want to be careful about conditioning approvals on the approvals of other departments, because that creates a bit of hot water on the commission side. We issue approvals for use and the building official issues approvals for occupancy. If there's a new certificate of occupancy required based upon the work that he's doing, he cannot occupy the structure until one has been issued. And that the issuance of that has nothing to do with this commission. The building official cannot hold it up because of something you do, nor can he issue it if you say it should be issued, right? It's almost like a mathematical equation. So like I said, we can condition that all the necessary approvals are obtained from health and building, but I don't think we want to get any more specific than that, because there's so many codes and requirements that go into what may be required and when ultimately something might be issued.
I was going to say that we've done conditions when it came to the health department, things like that, but like you said, it wasn't so specific as it was, just a general all health department requirements have been met type of thing.
Right. The problem you get into is if we condition it that they obtain a certain thing from a certain agency and that turns out to not be required or can't be obtained, then this approval now is thrown out the window because of, you're basically putting all of your authority into the hands of another outside agency, and that's where it gets a little bit tricky. That nothing you will do here will negate any needs for building or health approvals. He will always need a building permit. You always need health, whatever their codes say.
Whatever we identify for this application is not going to override what the requirements are from both building and health.
Exactly.
So Mike, how would you recommend that we phrase a conditional approval so we don't have to come back and go back through this a second time?
Well, again, Dick, we're getting more into deliberation right now, so that's something we can talk to Mike when we go to deliberation on this.
Okay.
We're in the hearing period right now, so thank you for that. Any further public comment? Check over here. I don't see any other hands. Okay, at this point, I will, oh, excuse me, Linda Roy. I'm sorry, go right ahead.
Thank you. I thought I was going to be skipped.
No. Just I was paging through the people, so go right ahead.
Yeah, that's fine. I just have a couple things. I'm curious as to, and this is directed probably more to the commission, as how the commission will issue a permit that requires proof or some kind of proof of primary residence when you don't have a definition yet of that, and what proof will be required to prove that you are in fact, I mean, anybody can say this is their primary residence, but will there be some type of proof of that? And the only other thing would be that your other requirement is only 3 short-term rentals in a 6-month period, but is there any way for the commission to monitor that so that we know that that's actually what's happening? You can't rely on neighbors to know, because you can have company coming and going, and that wouldn't necessarily be a short-term rental. So those are two of my concerns, because they're 2 big conditions of the special permit.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We have had the issue come up regarding monitoring of this, and we really don't have the staff or wherewithal to do such monitoring and all like that. What we do, what we would go by is if there were complaints that were issued by neighbors and friends, neighbors in the surrounding community regarding the rental itself. And like you said, it's hard for you to tell also. But again, if we have those complaints, if those are warrants, if those are concerns that are raised regarding someone's permit, then we are able to review that when the time comes around, somewhat after the fact, but not something we can do on a police state basis because we don't have the capabilities of doing that. When it comes to the primary residence, we go by, currently we go by a definition that is used on a basic stance that the town clerk office uses when it comes to amount of time spent in a primary residence. I believe it's something like 180 or 183 days or 6 months, I believe is their current definition. That we find somewhat lacking, and with next month's meeting, we should come up with a definition that both identifies documentation as well as time spent.
Okay, so would you be able to then issue this permit before that time, before your next meeting and the finalizing of that? Because then you would need to have that proof from this applicant and others.
Well, again, we do have a precedent setting for primary residence here that the town clerk office uses, and again, it's greater than 6 months residency at this point. But we're going to put some more teeth into that. So yes, we would be able to do it based on that precedent right now. It's just a matter of we get into some questions. I know Mr. Panic brought up an issue that kind of got us looking into more deeply into those things. So we would still issue this based on precedent.
Okay, and what type of proof are you expecting from the applicant that he in fact is or will be the primary resident of that home? I'm just curious.
I mean, if for an interim period between now and 2 weeks from now, we could simply have tax records. I'm trying to think of what else we had on the list there. Again, our tax rolls for ownership.
Driver's license.
As you said, driver's license with the permitting, that type of thing. Though it's not a requirement, we could ask for that at this point, but we're looking to make it a requirement, those types of documentations.
Okay, so if that's a requirement, it becomes a requirement, then are you going to go back to the people who've already had them issued and ask for those items as a condition of continuing to have the permit, or will that not come up again till review?
It would not come up again until review. We can't go back on a decision that's been made that way.
Okay, so that could be a concern, but I thank you for answering my questions.
Okay. Mr. Panic.
So in light of your revealing that the primary residence is going to be taking up in 2 weeks, and the fact that this applicant said it would be at least a month until he finished the project, and then the building inspector had to come and issue a CO, and I'm not sure why there would be a reason why the vote on this particular short-term rental couldn't wait for 2 weeks. He wouldn't be using it for the next 2 weeks. He wouldn't be finished with the house. He wouldn't be finished with the home in 2 weeks. So why would there be an issuance tonight with a very highly needed planning and zoning regulation being set to be done in 2 weeks? It seems almost like there's a short amount of time where the restrictions would be in place to show that this is a primary residence. Just seems like, the house isn't going to be ready for over a month. It, won't get a building inspector, won't get a permit. Why couldn't we wait 2 weeks until the better regulations that you have contemplated for the last 3 or 4 months that have kept getting continued due to a large building in town being clogging up your your docket? It just seems like I don't see how the applicant would be hurt or or punished in any way by waiting a couple of weeks to meet the new regulation. Seems logical.
Well, we've made no.
Did you say, one second, because you said tax record. Well, I own properties at the lake, so my tax records definitely say that I own the property. It doesn't say that doesn't say it's my primary residence, and I wouldn't admit to it is because it's not. But tax records, unless you're talking about income tax records that show his primary residence or his driver's license, that's going to be a rule maybe in a couple of weeks. I just don't see why you as a board couldn't wait a couple of weeks and just triple check. We already have a short-term rental that there was no regulations for, and I'm sure when his permit comes around, there'll be quite a few of us that are on this call, maybe a little afraid to speak up, but there's quite a few of us that are, we're very concerned several months ago when that one was approved, and we just don't. You said set a precedence. I don't want to continue the precedence that was already set by word of mouth that it's my primary residence, and that's no disrespect to Mr. Marcoux at all. I think I've made it clear in the past that I'm a rules and regulations guy, and I think that this is an instance where the applicant doesn't get hurt if you wait a couple of weeks. It could be on the same docket as the talking about the primary residence, and he can get his approval in a couple of weeks. The house still wouldn't be done. I don't see how that harms him. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, we haven't gone to, we're in the hearing process right now. So the input you're receiving is, we appreciate it. The input we've had about the building inspections, Mr. Marcoux's clarification on that is all part of the hearing process. When we go to deliberations and start discussing this, that's when, it could or could not come to a vote at that point through our deliberations.
Jeff, can I just clarify?
Yes, go ahead, Mike.
The discussion about primary residence, if the commission were to land on a definition, which they wanted to then incorporate into the zoning regulations, would require a text amendment. Text amendments, anything in the zoning regulation land is not retroactive. So any application received, approved, or considered prior to the adoption of that revised language would not be subject to that. So even if in 2 weeks you guys build consensus as to a definition, this application, which was submitted the end of January or early February, will not be subject to any future changes to the regulations, whatever they may be.
Well, you said we had 65 days from the closing of the hearing, correct?
You have 65 days to issue a decision on this, but
Right.
but
But
he
if we
locks
were
in.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, if we were to have a discussion on primary residence next month, and then we had a hearing, it would be June, whatever that date is, which would still put us within the 65 days, and we could potentially approve that for that evening. I think we still fall within line.
So an application has to be considered based upon the regulations as of the date of receipt. So this was
Okay,
received
all
at
right,
your
now I
February
understand.
meeting.
Now I understand. Okay. So I stand corrected there, Mr. Panic, about what we can do, but it doesn't mean for the interim that, I mean, as Mike said earlier, I'm riffing right now, but it doesn't mean we can't ask for, it doesn't mean it has to be presented to us, but a viable, good applicant might potentially, if we could ask for a driver's license to prove residency. If they don't provide it, there's nothing that requires them to do it. However, it would behoove them to do that when it came to, future review of their permit or whatever down the road.
So basically what you're saying is that if there was the choice was to approve the application tonight, what I thought I heard Mike D'Amato say is that he becomes grandfathered in, and any new regulations that happen a day from now or 2 weeks from now will never be applicable to this permit. He just gets grandfathered in forever, like the one that happened a couple of months ago. Is that a correct statement, that they're grandfathered in? They never have to meet the new regulations in 2 weeks? And if that is the case, I want to strongly oppose to this application if this committee is going to vote on this and make it permanent where there can be no 6-month review except if he has parties, which I don't believe he's going to have. But if we can't bring up, if the association or neighbors or the like can prove that he doesn't live there, or that any short-term rental anywhere in Ashford is not their primary residence under any circumstances, they're grandfathered in. That just seems like another precedence that we don't want to set after there was the possibility of a precedence that's already set on the last one that was approved. To me, that just sounds backwards. It sounds like we're adding fuel to the fire on this situation. And again, absolutely no disrespect to Mr. Marquis. I appreciate what he's trying to do for, veterans and wounded warrior soldiers. I highly appreciate that. But as a rules and regulations guy, to say that this is going to be grandfathered in is very discouraging. And I strongly oppose approving anything that we can't prove that there's primary residence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Janet, please go ahead. Or, excuse me, we're in public comment. I had Mr. Corval. I'll recognize you in just a second, Janet.
Thank you for recognizing me. Bob Corvo, 34 Amadon Drive. I have no objection to short-term rental on Amadon Drive. And Mr. Marcoux has done a wonderful job on the renovation of his property. I don't know if the board is familiar with what the property was originally. It was a 1-story, I believe a 2-bedroom home, total of 3 rooms and a half a bath. It is now a 2-story with 2 full baths. And as Mike has pointed out, I know I've been in touch with the building inspector who told me the initial building permit was limited to 8 windows, some work on the block foundation, and a few other repairs, the roof, etc. The end result is the raising, I believe, of the block foundation. The building has a now second story to it. All new windows, all new everything, air conditioning. So it's a beautiful building, but I fear that the total approvals have not been gotten, such as when you're doing major construction within 75 feet of the lake. I believe it's supposed to go to inland wetlands. I believe if you're adding a bathroom, I know I questioned about adding a half a bath to my property, and it was told there was a phenomenal process that I had to go through from Eastern Highlands. So I think there may be some lacking approvals there, but as Mike has pointed out, the board may not necessarily be able to act on that, but I would be concerned that the building itself go through the proper permitting processes. I'm a little concerned also that there seems to be some inconsistency. I never heard the applicant asked if he had a driver's license that was here in Ashford, whether he filed his tax returns here in Ashford. There was a promise to complete a driveway that we don't know if it will be completed or not. So these are things I think you're going to have to ascertain. I believe in consistency within the board. I think the board wants consistency as well. On that, I think I've pretty much covered what I'd like to cover. Again, I have no objection to his getting the short-term rental permit as long as all the other processes are handled properly.
Thank you very much for your input. Janet, I'm going to reach out to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to reply to Mr. Panic, and maybe you or Mike can correct me, but when we issue the first permit for short-term rental, it's for 1 year. So next year he has to apply again, and at that point he would have to meet any new regulations that we have put in place. Is that not correct?
Mike's got me questioning saying that at 100%. So Mike, would that still be grandfathered in for a approval of a reissue of a permit?
So there's two things. So any permit, they come back for a review, whether it be for a year, for 2 years, however many number of years, but it's not a brand new permit. So special permits do not expire. They run with the land like a variance. However, you can request these compliance reviews that we're effectively asking for them on the yearly basis, et cetera. The original language that's contemplated in the zoning regs predates some case law that we now have, which clarifies time limits on special permits and expirations, et cetera. However, aside from all of that, if an applicant represents to you A, B, C, and D, and you take that information in good faith and you use it to make your decision, and that is later found to be deceptive, or he is not compliant, or any person is not compliant with that information, then we would go through the process to commence enforcement and say, follow the rules or stop. And if they didn't, then we would continue to commence an action and we would go through the enforcement process legally. So even if we don't say shall be primary residence and they're renting it 4 times per 6 months instead of 3, whatever the case may be, we still have an enforcement mechanism, regardless of a definition or non-conforming or grandfathering, et cetera, that if they are not operating within the parameters of the permit that was given to them, that we can enforce, we can issue cease and desist orders, through the court process can issue fines. So all of that is still in front of us and possible if the regulations change or we determine they need to be tightened up.
Thank you. Any further input from the public? There's a hand, Linda Roy. Oh, yeah, Linda Roy, please.
That's me again. I just want to point out, everyone's talking about the primary residence thing as if it's something new. but it is in the original regulation. It just is not defined, but it is there saying that you have to be a primary, it has to be your primary residence.
Correct.
It just doesn't spell out how to prove it or the definition of that. So in fact, they are supposed to be a primary resident. The definition and all that is just going to be an addition to that.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further from the public? Anything from the commission members? And with that, Mr. Markey, any final statements from you?
No, just thank you for your time and hearing me out. Appreciate it.
Okay, very good. Is there a motion to close the hearing on PZ-23-4?
Mike, Jeff, is Alex. I'll make a motion to close the hearing.
Is there a second?
Janet, I'll second.
All those in favor of closing the hearing at this point?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. So we'll close the hearing on that. Thank you for your input, public, commissioners, on that. Moving on to the final new business of hearing and opening the hearing for PZ-23-5, one lot re-subdivision application of 285 Turnpike Road, owner, MK Bond. It's actually Micah and Kristen Bond, applicant A. Bushnell. And is there a representative, or is it Mr. Bushnell?
Yes, Andrew Bushnell
Okay.
here.
Thank you.
Good evening, Andrew Bushnell, professional engineer, licensed land surveyor with Bushnell Associates. Here tonight representing Michael and Christian Bond for re-subdivision of the property located at 285 Turnpike Road in Ashford. The property is 12.46 acres in total. It was approved as part of Temco Estate subdivision. It was approved by your commission back on July 11th, 2005 in its current configuration. At that time, there was 4.44 acres of conservation easement dedicated on the property, which you can see on the subdivision map.
Mike, can you call that up for us? Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Bushnell.
Okay, so you can see the conservation easement there that was established at the time of the original subdivision back in 2005. And tonight we're here with an application to create one additional lot, which is noted as lot 6A in the lower right-hand corner of the property there along Turnpike Road. The intention of the bonds is to sell that property or transfer that property to Kristen's parents so they can build a house there. The lot would consist of 2.11 acres. We're proposing a 4-bedroom house there. It would utilize the existing paved driveway with some modifications to bring that driveway up to the town of Ashford common driveway specs, specifically widening out to 18 feet. It's about 11 feet wide now. So it'll be widened out to a paved surface of 18 feet and also with 3-foot clear shoulders on each side. So if you're driving a larger like fire truck up there, the mirrors and things wouldn't be hitting trees. So the driveway would be improved. We would try the best we can to use the existing underground utilities from Turnpike Road to service a new house. You may have to excavate and replace those utilities or add conduits. We're not sure on that yet. But the utilities will be underground. There will be a driveway easement established across the new lot if approved, allowing the existing house to use the existing driveway across what would be lot 6A. So lot 6A would have frontage on Turnpike Road of 206.38 feet, and the remaining 285 Turnpike Road property would have frontage on Turnpike Road of 225.46 feet. And as I mentioned, access would be for both lots on the existing paved driveway, which would be upgraded to 18 feet wide to meet the common driveway standards. We would be adding one turnout also, just to the just beyond the new lot there, to allow for vehicle passage to bring it up to the common driveway standards. You can see if you, I don't know, Mike, if you go to the next sheet, the grading sheet, that shows a little more detail just of the house location, the grading, the septic. We've had the septic reviewed by the Eastern Highlands Health District. They've approved it for subdivision purposes. See the house there, the proposed driveway for the house, the grading, footing drain outlet, wetlands. The only activity nothing in the wetland itself. Some of the driveway widening will be within the wetlands regulated area, and also if we need to do any additional underground utility work, that would be in the wetlands regulated area too. I do believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but this did get approved at the last wetlands meeting. I haven't got official confirmation of that, but I was told it was.
Yes, I believe I saw confirmation the legal notice of decision was run.
Okay. Okay. So, we've gone before the Wetlands Commission and received approval for the proposed work in the regulated area. This plan also shows proposed well location, proposed sediment erosion control with silt fence, stockpiling. The last sheet shows driveway details, erosion sediment control plans, and construction notes, silt fence detail, footing drain outlet detail. Your plan may not. I think there was a snafu with our printing. The amount of material to be imported as part of the construction. We don't intend to export any material from the new lot. We do anticipate having to bring in 75 cubic yards of select fill septic sand to construct a septic system, and approximately 140 cubic yards of gravel to base the new driveway to the house from the common driveway, and also to widen the common driveway. And also with that activity, about 25 cubic yards of bituminous concrete pavement to pave those driveway surfaces. We did submit to the state archaeologist. It wasn't found to be an area of significance. We also submitted to the Wyndham Waterworks for their review. Didn't hear anything from them. I think Mike has all that documentation. He had it online with the packet there. We did send out the certified abutters notices for the meeting tonight. I believe Mike has all the certifieds that I sent him, demonstrating that was completed. If anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Okay.
At this point.
Yes, input from the commission to Mr. Bushnell. Go ahead, Jerry.
Widening the driveway, does that go all the way up to the existing house?
No, it just has to go to where the driveways are commonly shared between the two houses. So once we get past the proposed driveway for the proposed house, the widening would end.
I'm familiar with the house, because the driveway is quite long and winding up the hill.
Mhm.
And in a couple spots, there's curves in the road. I'm just wondering about the fire department with the fire trucks getting up and the ambulance up there.
Yeah,
Um,
I can just elaborate on that. So I did send this to Chief Varga for review. And if you look, I can bring it up afterwards. There are specific limitations to the grade so that it doesn't exceed the max. And there is a 10-foot wide by 40-foot long truck turnout just past the proposed property line, so that an emergency vehicle bypass would be accommodated, and the chief is happy with the plans as presented to you guys. I think he actually may have gone out to the property as well.
Okay.
Right, it'll be a turnout down low and then expand the turnout up at the existing house a little bit also, we proposed. So there'll be plenty of room to turn around in there. And I don't, as far as the curves, I don't, they're not really tight curves or anything like that. So there should be no problem, as far as traveling in and out of there. And then there'll be the turnout areas. So, if they do visit the lower house, they won't have to drive all the way up to turn around and come back down, and so there'll be a turnout for each house basically, or in the vicinity of each house.
Okay.
Thank you. Input from commission members. Okay, public comment at this point regarding the application. I think she had her hand up there. I'm gonna go, you're on mute, Marie Desarles? You're on mute.
Hi,
There
how
you-
are you?
Very well, how
Thank
you go?
you.
Thank you.
So my husband and I live on the house directly in front at 285 Turnpike Road. 288, sorry, Turnpike Road. And one of my question is, it talks about clearing of trees. And I just wondered, like, what area are we talking about? Like, how much clearing is going to take place?
So I can answer that. So if you look on the plan on page, the third sheet, there are limits of clearing established by the location of the silt fence. So there may be some minimal tree clearing along the existing driveway just to get that 18 feet and the 3 feet on each side. The majority of the clearing is going to be up where the house is proposed, which is quite a ways from the road. So I don't think it's going to affect your view or anything. And obviously nothing's going to happen in that conservation easement. Or in the, the wetlands along the frontage. Nothing really right along the frontage. It's all up the hill.
Okay.
Okay, anything else?
So, well, there was another comment in one of these documents that said the house location may vary. Is it just like how it faces that may vary, or it could be lower down, or what was meant by that?
In general, I mean, a couple of things, the footprint of it could change, the size, probably not much bigger, it'd be smaller if anything. The orientation, you could twist it a little bit here or there to work in better with the contours. But in general, between the wetlands, the regulated area, the septic area, the house is in the required yard setback, side yard, rear yard. I mean, honestly, the house is pretty much stuck where it is. I mean, this site plan here is pretty much designed around the house they know they want to build. So I don't really anticipate any significant changes.
Okay, so those are my questions, just to keep it as,
Thank you.
covered as possible. Thank you.
Paul Varga.
Jeff and the commission, I just wanted to, I am intimately familiar with that property. and myself, Mr. D'Amato, and the fire marshal reviewed that updated driveway plan. And I think it adequately addresses, it meets the current regulation for common driveway. And I'm not concerned about the top side of it. I know the house well, and I know the driveway well in the property. It wouldn't be an issue. I actually think I commented to Mike that I wish all the driveways in Ashford looked like that, mine included. So with the upgrades, my biggest concern was the entrance to the new house, and not and as the applicant stated, having to go all the way up to turn around, and they addressed that. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that that's where that came from on my part. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, it is a beautiful driveway.
Any other input from the public? See no one waving. I see no hands. Okay. Anything from the commission? Anything further?
No, it is a beautiful driveway. I've gone up it many times doing mail and have a deer walk across in front of you. Beautiful spot.
Okay. Any final comments, Mr. Bushnell?
No.
Okay, very good. Hearing no further comments. Pretty straightforward. I'm looking for a motion to close the hearing for PZ-23-5.
Motion to close.
Jerry, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second, Alex.
Alex, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Okay. That leads us to our agenda. They have no scheduled unfinished business at this point for this meeting. Leading us into new business. Item A, PZ-23-3, special permit application for section 300-10 for reduction of non-conforming use of 54 Seacar Road. We've continued this hearing, so there's really no deliberation to go on it. We will have Mike work with Paul Varga for looking at the access when it comes to the driveway and the access up on top of the hill there with the multiple buildings. And also, we'd probably like to get Ken's opinion on some of this for the next meeting. So we'd probably like to have him be there for the hearing for next time.
I will look to see, I may have something from him when he originally suggested this. So if I have that, I will provide it to you guys for the next one. And if not, then we can reach out to him. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Discussing deliberations on PZ-23-4 application for short-term rental at 7 Amadon Drive. I open up the commission for deliberations and discussion.
Jeff, it seems like we have two options. One is to continue until other deliberations are complete, or the other is to approve it contingent upon those permits being completed.
I would rather wait until we establish our residence requirements.
I'm sorry, say it again, Jerry. I didn't hear the last part.
Establish our that they're a resident by their mail or registration of a car, their voting or driver's license, that they are really a resident.
So Jeff or Mike, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but did I understand that we have to base our decision, our deliberations on the regulations in place at the time the application was submitted. So whatever we come up with for residency definitions have no relevance on this application. Is that correct? Until a year from now?
Right. We could, I mean, as I said, there's no reason we can't ask for a driver's license or a piece of mail or anything like this upon, but he doesn't necessarily have to. He hasn't made any claim that that it is not his primary residence. And so we can ask for it. We just have no requirement of him to provide it to us.
Right. My only, I don't know if it's founded or not. My concern is that this is going to become some type of a group home, and he, whatever complies with it, whatever residency definitions we come up with, it's just to keep everybody happy, and if I were in that neighborhood, that would be my concern.
Well, again, I don't know if one were to look at it as a group home, again, with its limitation of being only, 3 rentals in a 6-month period. It's not much of a home, if you will,
Well, technically,
long term anyways.
could he possibly rent it to Wounded Warriors Foundation, and then they could have whoever they wanted in and out of there? I'm just I'm guessing, asking.
As a
So-
long-term rental? 'Cause
As
again, his
even if it was a
his
short term.
application- His application for a special permit is for a short-term rental.
Right,
He would
which
have-
Wounded Warrior could be a short-term rental. They could rent it 3 times in 6 months.
Can I clarify? So a group home is a statutorily defined term. If a property meets the definition of a group home, which I think is 6 or less, state law says you must treat it no different than a single family home. So if you wanted to rent that to 5 Wounded Warriors or anybody that was receiving any type of care as defined, and that was acknowledged or recognized as a group home for the state of Connecticut, then it would be a single family home in the eyes of the zoning regs. But that would be separate and distinct from the short-term rental use. He certainly couldn't do both.
Okay.
So as Dick had summarized, I mean, we don't have to come to a decision tonight. However, it would be a matter of what our requirements are, because again, when it came to the primary residence expanded definition, we won't have that in place for a couple of months before we can get that in place through hearing and through approval.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Janet.
It seems to me that the commission shouldn't be granting approval until the building is actually proved to be lived in. So I think we should either wait, or, as Dick said, either wait or make the approval contingent upon everything that needs to be approved, so it's actually gotten a CO.
I agree.
So I was thinking about the best way to do that in not overextending what we can do. And I think that something you could consider, I mean, I've been sort of writing up conditions for all the property or everything we've been talking about. And I have, I think, 4 or 5 for this one, but for this in particular, I think you could say that a copy of final health and building approvals shall be provided to the zoning officer prior to the commencement of rentals on the property. So we're not telling him he has to obtain a certain type of document from a certain type of agency, but we're telling him that he needs to provide copies of the final approvals to us. And so that leaves the jurisdiction of what is required with those agencies, but requires that he provide them to us before he rents. And it's no different than, asking for a copy of a DOT approval for property on a state road. We're not telling you need to get DOT approval because it's up to DOT, but we're telling them they need to provide it to us before they can move forward. I have the standard sort of condition that we've had on the others, which is that the short-term rental approval shall be willfully terminated upon sale or transfer of the property. We've put those on the others. He indicated based upon the bedroom count, a total of 4 occupants, so I included that as a condition. And that the name and contact information for the person or persons other than the property owner responsible for the property shall be provided to the town prior to rental of the property. And that I referenced the criteria already within the zoning reg. So shall be conducted in accordance with section 300-17D.
What Mike has just outlined sounds very reasonable to me. It makes no sense to keep on dragging these things out if we know what the outcome is going to be.
Okay. Is there a motion to accept approve the special permit application for the short-term rental at 7 Amadon Drive per the conditions outlined by the zoning enforcement officer?
So moved.
I'll second, Alex.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed?
Aye.
Jerry? So abstentions? So moved. Okay, going on to business of PZ-23-1, the one lot re-subdivision application of 285 Turnpike Road by M&K Bond, Mika and Kristen Bond, presented by Mr. Bushnell. Discussion, deliberation on this seemed pretty straightforward.
Yeah, they seem to have all their ducks in order on this project.
Yeah, when they were willing to put things up to rent it out to anyone that wanted to rent it, it made sense. The only thing we're really approving is this cluster of houses close together and the fact that they could be rented separately. And then I think the other thing that we talked about is having Paul Varga go up there and make sure that the driveway is acceptable to him.
Yeah, Dick, we're not talking about that issue though. We're on the item C, the PZ-23, the re-subdivision application, not the non-conforming.
Okay.
Thank you. Again, pretty straightforward. Is there a motion to accept the application for the re-subdivision of 285 Turnpike Road?
Motion to accept.
Jerry, is there a second?
Alex, second.
We'll go give Janet this one. Janet, second.
All right.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Abstentions? It's so moved. Okay, so as going back to what Dick said, and we will reiterate what we need to do for the special permit application for the reduction of the non-conforming use. Again, Mike speaking with and working with Paul Varga and the applicant for the emergency vehicle access. And again, the consultation, whether what Mike already has from our legal counsel or bringing Ken in to discuss with us some of the ups and downs of that. Mike, zoning officer report.
I don't have anything specific to report.
So it happens when you're busy. Okay, very good. Move for adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn? Jerry, motions to adjourn quietly. Janet
Janet,
seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 So moved. Thank you for your attention.